Hi everyone, welcome to episode 10 of RoboWeekly. Hey Dan, how's it going?
It's going well. How you doing?
Good, 10, 10, 10. Can't believe it.
Not much to say about 10.
No, not really. Except
Fingers and toes.
we have a lot of people watching us. Not many people commenting. I'm going to kind of give up on that. I just thought I'd mention it. Lots of people from all around the world, which is quite nice. We'll talk about that a little later when we're talking about tariffs. But let's robot news this week. There have been some developments, so let's start taking a look at them. First one's a collaboration between two big kahunas, Boston Dynamics and RAI, Robot AI Institute. Now take a look at this.
Yeah, the walking's getting better.
Walking is getting better.
Yep. I mean, I do think it's an uncanny valley type thing.
Well, it's certainly not looking like the weird. I mean, this is very, very humanistic. I mean, to the point where it may have learned its stuff from humans.
I think I learned a lot of mocap and maybe 2D, 3D translation.
But the point I wanted to make was that, we've spent a lot of time saying that these things walk like shit, and here we go. This does not walk like shit.
Nope, they're addressing all of the negatives. That's pretty impressive. Wow, that had to come from a motion capture.
Yeah. Anyway, as I said, two companies.
Yep.
Going to cost a lot of money. So let's keep moving forward. But that was a big piece of news. Everyone knows about that.
Okay.
Yeah. Any comments on that before we look at this Sim2Real?
No, I mean it's very impressive. I think it's still, knowing Boston Dynamics, they really do focus on these demo reels, right? And that's not a put down. I wonder, I mean, I'd like to see it connected to an LLM and actually see how it does in terms of understanding its own body and communication.
Yeah.
So, what are the real world, operative, features that it's going to have, on a warehouse or in a home or a hospital. I'm very curious how these things work in real life. Sorry, say that again. I
said that could be pure motion capture, as you pointed out. I mean, we don't know how
much. And if it's motion, right? If each little stunt is mocapped, it's hard to see how that generalizes. So I'd be curious. Do they have a vision language model? Vision language action model, or are they just sort of doing one-off, recipes that are very impressive?
We don't know. There was an announcement which I don't have on our list, which was somebody bought 10,000 of them.
Oh my gosh!
That's what you need to buy in order to figure that out.
Well, they probably also published papers.
The next one's an announcement from a company. Yes.
You dropped out. A company called who?
Let's move on to the next one. This is Sanctuary AI, and they are a Sim2Real company.
Yeah.
And they have an industry-leading Sim2Real that learns from multiple manipulation.
Right.
Exactly. Okay. So that's basically it. It is a Sim2Real. It's currently got 1,000 Sims working on digital manipulation, and they are claiming that their Sim2Real engine is pretty good.
Do you know what it's based on?
It doesn't say. It just says industry leading Sim2Real.
All right, so this is my wheelhouse, right? I mean,
I do. I brought it up. Yeah, yeah.
So I being shit with my hands, I've always focused on the software and very much focused on simulation. Before it was cool. When I'll age myself and anybody out there who's been doing robots for 20 years. I started with something called Player Stage Gazebo, which is, open source people are really great at marketing, give everything 3 names. And that turned into what's called ROS, right? Robot Operating System, and then ROS 2. So I've been on top of this for a long time, and I fool with a lot of different physics engines. Work we've been doing recently on our robot has been using Mujoko, which is, kind of industry standard. and it has a lot of problems with manipulation and friction points. It is not a great simulator for this task that I'm seeing on this video, which is, so it's a good simulator for walking and wheeled robots and you know, some things with limbs. But when it comes to contact, like you've got, is this a, can't tell if this is a 3 or 4 fingered hand. It looks like it's a
3 and a thumb.
3 and a thumb, right? So what you've got here is they have to be doing a really good job of simulating the physics of the contact between the fingers and the object that it's manipulating, and they're showing that. You know,
and why is there thousands of them? Are they doing that to generate data?
No, well, that's the synthetic data. Yeah, what they're doing is just I mean, it's thousands of. It doesn't matter what they, you know, if you do, like, you could do one of them really fast, or that's just parallelizing like GPU for training LLMs. It's just, you know, they're randomizing the starting point and then running through the model they have, and then they probably have a critic model. It's probably reinforcement learning, and you know that this is just a visual trick. Like, oh, look at all the things we're running. You know, they're running on servers to generate, you know, tens or hundreds of thousands of examples. You know, that are better or worse.
So to be clear, that tens and hundreds of thousands of examples are literally synthetic data, and it's using RL on those basically to learn the task.
That's my guess. Yeah.
Okay, great. RL being reinforcement learning.
Right.
Okay, great. Let's move on to Signa. Now, Signa is, the reason I've brought Signa up is because it's to discuss patents. And whether one should patent stuff in this environment where things are brand new. Obviously, Jonas Salk didn't patent polio vaccine. Not that that's necessarily parallel to this. This is a company called Signa. The reason I'm bringing this up is that they have filed their 22nd patent. They are a patent accumulator. And
let me just guess, they're in Texas.
I don't know, but I'm sure they're filing their patents in Texas. That's for damn sure.
No, they're filing them in Texas because
rocket. But their patent, this 22nd patent is for cloud-based computing method that reduces onboard hardware requirements. So there we can see some kind of LiDAR particle filter thing, and they're claiming that they've got a cloud-based computing method that reduces onboard hardware. So I mean, that's a pretty general requirement. I'm sure they're disclosing what the actual method is in the patent. But just a quick question about what you think about patents in this environment and whether they should be filed. And well, I know source.
I mean, I go back and forth on it. It's a complicated field. Just for background, my grandfather was an inventor who had his name on 200 patents. But that was a sort of kinder, gentler.
How are you up to?
I think I'm probably on about a dozen. I was on 6 for the On2 stuff, and I've filed other ones. But the patents we had at On2, I think, had a lot to do with that acquisition being valuable for Google to acquire the company. And the general thought process and sort of attitude in Silicon Valley has often been that patents are for trolls. But they're also to defend against trolls, right? So you sort of put in a position where you can't bring a switchblade to a gunfight. You know, if you're doing high-tech stuff, you're going to be filing patents, even if you don't intend. What Silicon Valley really hates is when someone has a portfolio of patents, they're not actually building any product, and they're out suing everybody, and their whole business model is just to sue and settle, right? I mean, that just rubs people the wrong way. And you know,
with the DVR, the digital video guide.
Sure, and I think right, and there was like one-click shopping from Amazon or something, and you know, windshield wipers, and
you know, I understand that when in the field of biomedicine, where they're investing massive amounts in R&D, and they need to be protected so they can make that money back. That doesn't happen in this kind of technology. This is people just literally, you know, grabbing real estate, you know, wherever they can in a fast-moving environment. I'm not quite sure it's the same.
Well, let me advocate for the position that I've taken in industry, which has done very well. And we started it on too, and Google carried it forward after they acquired the company, which is to patent your technology so that if somebody else is trying to patent their technology and claiming you're infringing them. In the case of On2, that was the MPEG consortium. And Google, because they were founded in 2000, didn't have the patent portfolio that Intel and Sony and Fraunhofer and other companies had. So they bought our company On2, and they extended this policy that you can do anything you want with this patent royalty free, unless you try to get royalties from us, in which case you have no rights anymore.
Right.
So, and that's a thing, and there are companies like MongoDB that sort of play a game of patenting or rather open sourcing a lot of stuff, but also having patents and, clauses in the open source license. I mean, this could be a 3-hour discussion. It gets into.
Okay. Well, in fact, our last one is going to touch on that again. But we're going to get to that. We've got one thing before we get to that. So let's take a look at the next one, which is a robot called Serve. Which the critical thing here is this is a spin-off from Uber. It's a delivery cart, and the big news this week is that it's actually going into service into Dallas Fort Worth, and it's delivering for 7-Eleven and of course Uber Eats, having spun out of Uber. Right. So this is now going live, 10,000 units. Dallas Fort Worth as a city has officially welcomed this trial with open arms. It's obviously a delivery robot. Dallas Fort Worth. I think I've been there. I think it's pretty flat.
Where does it have the right of way? Sidewalk or street or bike path?
So I'm going to guess that it has the right of way nowhere. That it's on the very, very bottom of the right of way totem pole. And then
but it's not going to go on a highway, obviously, and it's probably not going to go on a road. It's going to go on a sidewalk or a path.
Right. So I'm again guessing. I'm guessing it's sidewalk or path. This is where pedestrians can walk, and I believe that it will give way to anything and everything.
And it's probably pretty slow.
I expect it to. Slow?
Yeah, I mean, I imagine it's not cruising down at 20 miles an hour because
no, I would imagine
it's more likely to hurt somebody.
No, 3 to 5 miles an hour, and it's going to do everything it can to avoid everything and everyone. And if
kids are going to come and jump on it and punk it.
If it sees anything, it will just probably stop. And kids will come over and push it on from the side so it falls over and can't ride itself. But anyway, that is big news. Uber are pretty excited about it. I don't know how much of it they still own, but congratulations, Dallas Fort Worth.
So, question: what happened to the idea of Amazon and people bringing you things in drones?
I don't know. I did know an executive at Amazon about 4 years ago told me that 100% is real and it's going to start happening. Yeah. Well, I'm assuming that the question is when. That was 4 years ago. We know that timing gets all fucked up in these things. So I don't know about that. That's not what this is about. But according to Amazon, at some point in the future, I think it'll work in rural areas. I can't see it working where you've got power lines, but I'm sure it'll come to pass. Our last one actually touches on patents again. I brought this one. I wanted to bring this one up because it's the only consumer robot that's ever been successful has been Roomba. This is a commercial Roomba, and the announcement was from LG and Marriott. LG are the hardware makers, Marriott are the ones who are going to use it. Interestingly, I found no mention of the word Roomba anywhere in the 2-page announcement.
Well, what about iRobot, the company?
They either bought iRobot, the company, or patents are 7+7, and I'm guessing Roomba was more than 14 years ago, which means you don't have to call it a Roomba. It's 7 years, you get an exclusive. 7 years after that, it's not an exclusive. You're allowed to charge a license, and after 14 years, it's out there.
Public. Is that how it works? I'm not a lawyer.
That's how it used to work anyway. So,
but did they? How do you know it has anything to do with Roomba? How do you know it has anything to do with the iRobot company? Okay. There's been lots of knockoffs. Yeah, right. Well, I mean, this gets back to we've talked about, do you want to be a hardware company? Because hardware tends to get pushed to commodity pricing, right? And you didn't bring up the tariffs, which I thought we were going to talk about. Maybe we'll talk about that next week.
We will in a second.
Okay, all right, we're going to hit that. So I think, the issue is there are if you look at the history like of the PC, right? The Mac came out and Atari and Apple had, vertically integrated computers. But what really took off was the PC because IBM actually open sourced it in a sense and said, anybody can build a PC, as long as they write their own firmware.
What was the name of that phone book size thing that used to come out every week? That sort of catalog of parts. Do you remember it? It was literally
Jameco?
Was that what it was?
I'm not sure what you're...
I can't remember. It was like a computer shopper thing.
Well, yeah, I mean, there was very DIY, and there was the Altair. I'm talking about a little later in the early 80s when the PC came out. The point I'm making is that when the PC came out... Okay, right. Well, when the PC came out, everybody could get one, and the software from Microsoft was agnostic because the hardware platform was nailed down. So they're doing stuff in the AI field where they're creating APIs for LLMs to interact with each other and like sort of have a schema. And we're actually working on that in our lab for robotics to have like a simple sort of call response, like web type interface where the point of this is that you want standards so people can build the hardware such that the software can run on a number of different pieces of hardware. And the VLA models that we've been looking at all claim to be somewhat hardware agnostic. So the profit's not going to be in the hardware, I don't think. It's going to be in software, which now includes data sets and models and all of the rest of it, not just the source code.
Right. Before we move on to talk about our subject of the week, I did want to tell a quick anecdote. When Roomba first came out, we did have one, and it did look something like the one that we're looking at. And we had a new puppy, and the puppy had diarrhea in the middle of the night.
Oh, God.
Our Roomba was programmed to come on at 5 a.m. and do a quick sweep, and it came on at 5 a.m. And you can see those brushes on the outside.
Yeah.
The brushes were whirring around, picked up the dog's wet feces, and then proceeded to go around the apartment and the spinning brushes.
Spreading the joy.
In between the floorboards, because we had a hardwood floor.
Oh, God.
And you can imagine what it
consequences. Yeah, I imagine what it smelled like.
It was pretty awful. I don't believe that's a unique story, but I thought I'd tell it anyway. So let's talk about tariffs. Of course, tariffs is
we have to.
Unfortunately, I mean, it's really boring and stupid and horrible, and no one understands it. But let's give it a shot. Of course, everything we buy, all the hardware we buy, is not made in America. It all comes. Everything that we buy for our lab comes from the Far East. There was a symposium in New York last week where they talked about how this might affect the robot business. And the general consensus was positive on the basis of the fact that AI and robotics was such an important facet of the future and Department of Defense that it will be carved out by DOGE and the powers that be, because it's going to be part of the real race and not just some crappy race about cars. And so that we have nothing to worry about. And in fact, we are going to be making things more optimal, less dependent on humans. And so, we're going to be okay.
Well, that's
the first part. That's the first part of my question.
All right, that's a take. I think my issue with it is, to the degree that I understand economics, is not so much what the policy is, but the likelihood that the policy will stay the same or change creates friction and uncertainty. People don't like to bet on uncertainty. Like if I design a robot that uses 6 actuators that I'm speccing out from China, and it costs $2,000 to build last week, now it's going to be $3,000, or maybe it's going to go back to $2,000. So it's hard to make your business plans when there's that kind of uncertainty. That's my biggest criticism. Like wherever you fall politically on whether tariffs are fair to the American worker or not, the problem I have with this particular episode is it creates uncertainty, and that's why it's affecting the stock market. But it affects us because we buy parts from all over the world.
So let me ask you a hypothetical question. If we're moving forward creating our sub X $1,000 robot, which we are, or sub $5,000 robot, or sub $3,000 robot, that's what we're doing. If we continue to do that and we roll out our product and it suddenly becomes, it goes up from 3,000 to 4,500, maybe we should be looking at other markets to sell into. Maybe we should be looking at the markets that are actually producing hardware. We have, China is no longer the most populous country in the world. India has 1.4 billion people. More Indians watch this show than people in the United States. Obviously, India, it speaks English. Everyone in India speaks English, but still, there's, that is a significant market. Should companies like us start to look at these other markets, and if so, which ones?
Well, I don't know what are the legalities and complexities of a U.S. company sourcing parts in other countries and then selling to those other countries. I mean, it seems to me that we're gonna be charged a tariff getting the parts, and then a tariff is going to be charged again because they're reciprocal tariffs in a trade war. So we're going to be, having friction both directions, right? So you really wouldn't want to set that company up.
No, I was thinking the way I was thinking of it. The way I was thinking of it was a foreign subsidiary, and whatever country that foreign subsidiary happens to be in sources all the parts locally. And I would guess that in a country as large.
I am not a lawyer, so I'm the wrong person to ask. But that makes sense.
All right. Well, that was just an idea I had with confusions of how to move forward. Maybe one of them is to source locally and sell locally, and that's gonna knock out the tariff issue, whatever happens, and take away that uncertainty.
Yep.
But yeah, tariffs is an issue. I happen to think also that it's going to be a time-based thing that cannot continue, and I don't believe the oligarchs that put in there will allow him to let it continue. I believe that when we talk about this in 1 week's time, the tariffs will have either disappeared or been resolved in some way. That is my guess.
You want to make a bet? Pinky bet?
Yeah. You want to go over or under on 1 week?
I'm under on 1 week. I don't think it's going to resolve itself. Okay. No, I mean over. I mean, no. What I'm saying is it's going to take a lot longer than a week.
Okay, so
over or under by gambling.
All right, so I don't know what day everyone's going to see it, but we're recording this on April the 8th, Tuesday. So Dan has got the over to the 15th.
All right.
Okay, that pretty much does it for this week. We're really pleased all those people all over the world are watching this. In actual fact, that makes us very happy. We know you're not going to comment, but when we launch our products, we'll probably have a Discord channel, and I'm sure most of you will like that a lot more. Yep. But again, really, thank you for watching, and we'll see you next week and see if tariffs are still in place. Thanks a lot.
10.